This is something that happened a few days ago on April 9, where the passenger was removed by force from United Flight 3411. And it was waiting to depart from Chicago's airport and to Kentucky, Louisville. The story behind this was an overbooking that happened by United, who had to fly 4 staff members and then ask for volunteers among the passengers to leave their seat, and promoting initially a $400 per passenger and then $800 plus a paid hotel stay, so they can get their crew to fly to Kentucky. But the passengers were able to spend the night and being booked on the next flight the very day after. No passenger wanted to volunteer, and the company used a computer to randomly select the 4 seats that had to be vacated. 3 people exited the plane, which, by the way, everybody was already boarded and the plane was ready to fly. But then the last passenger refused to leave his seat. Then the altercation escalated when the police and security were called and removed this elderly gentleman from his seat. And it was something quite violent because the law enforcement, with the security of the airport, by dragging and moving this man from his seat, they busted up his lips and they dragged him across the aisle as if he were a corpse. Now, you might think this was another incident of some lunatic passenger who misbehaved while traveling, but it wasn't the case. The passenger did not breach any security or threaten anyone. He simply wanted to travel and refused United's proposal. So United asked, and the selected passenger refused. He said, "I don't wish to delay my flight," out of his personal reasons. To add insult to injury, United CEO Oscar Munoz, he reached out through a letter to the staff working on the airplane, the airplane involved in this incident, and stated, "Dear team, like you, I was upset to see and hear about what happened last night on board United Express Flight 3411, headed from Chicago to Louisville. While the facts and circumstances are still evolving, especially with respect to why this customer defied Chicago aviation security officer the way he did, to give you a clear picture of what transpired, I've included below a recap from the preliminary reports filed by our employees. As you will read, the situation was unfortunately compounded when one of the passengers you politely asked to the plane refused, and it became necessary to contact Chicago Aviation Security Officer to help. Our employees followed established procedure for dealing with a situation like this. While I deeply regret the situation arose, I also emphatically stand behind all of you, the workers, and I want to commend you for continuing to go above and beyond to ensure we fly right." And then the letter continues with a recap of the situation. Now, the lack of sensibility from Munoz over the situation has sparked an outrage over the internet at how this whole thing was publicly handled. So paint United as if they saved the day using that letter is a bit too much. Also because the man dragged out of the floor is being depicted as if he were the source of the main problem. In analysis, United asked for volunteers to be placed on the next flight for the day after. So because they overbooked the plane when the 4 of their staff had to be urgently flight from Chicago. So sounds like something that it's United's fault from the get-go, as we got this information. So as we see, this is how the thing unwrapped. I don't know, to me it looks like United screwed up, and I don't know, along the line they tried to resolve the situation in the most horrible way. So they used the law enforcement to the company's bidding, basically. The way the incident unwrapped, the way the whole thing this thing evolved, is to the public eye through the media also, because did not just happen and then it just died overnight. This thing started blowing huge. Last month, also, like 2 girls were denied boarding on another United flight because they were wearing leggings, and this sparked another outrage, thinking what's going on with United. Now, we have police and airport security being dispatched at any company's wheel under the false pretense of security matter. Honestly, who dares challenge this status quo? So who's going to say, oh no, well, the company's at fault? They have a monopoly. If you want to fly, you follow what they say. Otherwise, you get treated how this gentleman was treated. Like a criminal, basically, I guess. But what amazes me is how broken the airline experience has become for the user. Not only onboard quality during flight has drastically dropped in the last 20 or so years, while ticket price has gone up, baggage weight and the tolerance for the baggage has shrunk. Some routes are not serving food anymore, and airlines will charge for anything nowadays. Even if you have an oversized luggage, they will just go and bill you in order to make a profit. Now, between long boarding lines, screening, overzealous security staff, and underperforming airlines, traveling continues to become a stressful experience for everybody. So picture that, for example, if you have a 90 minutes flight, it requires it to be 2 hours. It requires you 2 hours for you to safely leave your house and reach the airport, just in case. Just to play it safe. Between, might could be traffic on the way, the queue at the airport, you can't find parking, you can't find any Uber from your house or any cab or anything like that. So anything that might create a delay from you to get into the airport, getting on board the plane. And, security measures that have overwhelmed the fun of traveling. And we don't look at it with a smile anymore. We don't get the excitement anymore. Instead, we get worried that missing the flight or that some additional document issued last minute from the government should have been implemented before the travel or anything like that that's going to prevent you from reaching your destination. One of the issues that has handicapped the air travel, in my opinion, is this little interest towards the users or the passengers, and also the whole the way the user gets treated by the environment of the airport, the terminal, the way architects drafted and conceived the building itself. In some cases, we also see terminals where function is given away to form. There's an highlight on the aesthetic portion too much, in my opinion, and at the cost of the user experience. Some airports struggle in conceiving a simple layout for passengers to follow. You see the floor planning becomes maze, and there's also a lack of proper signage. They also contribute to confuse any traveler who lands for the first time at a new airport. Picture yourself, you land for the first time, I don't know, like LAX or Calgary or anything like that, and suddenly you don't know where to go, who to ask. Signs are bad, airport is a labyrinth, so where am I going? And it happened to me personally. I missed a flight from Toronto to New York last year because Pearson Terminal was so big that they removed the flight from one gate to another one, and they didn't update it enough and missed the flight right there. There's an issue that comes to mind, which is that as airports get commissioned, they get drafted, they get built, they are open, and 10 more years has gone by from the date proposed, from the date where they were commissioned. The issue here is that as airports get commissioned, as they are mandated, drafted, built, and opened, there's the inauguration, a period of at least 10 years or something has gone by. So by that time, also new airplanes are introduced to the public. Technology changes and people's behavior changes too. So the whole thing evolves, and has the conception of the airport in the past decade was initiated 10 years after from when the airport was just a sketch on a piece of paper to when it gets officially opened. Everything has changed. So there has to be a way to reshape terminals and simplify that nature with better interior design. Thinking about like a simple layout that can facilitate passenger their transit in a way that it can become more enjoyable. It can become enjoyable again to board the plane. The environment, the atmospheres, and the whole design the airports include have changed significantly in the last 15 years. We have noticed that every time that we go inside an airport, an overwhelming sense of intimidation or guilt comes upon us. We have to consider that passengers inside the structures have their behavior controlled by a specific set of abstract rules that are highly enforced, and they also determine the engagement of air travel and the way people behave and they're perceived. And any breach of such behavior is highly upheld by the law enforcement, by security, as we just saw at Chicago airport. I believe that this behavior that United used was a big shortcoming and also was a lack of good PR. But airlines recently became aware how they've turned into the gatekeepers of air travel and the whole customer base. And they perfectly know that they can exercise their absolute power at any time, anywhere, anyhow, and the only side to lose is the passengers. They know that they're not going to question, otherwise they know that there is law enforcement to be called upon the passengers if any misbehavior happen. Companies like United also ought to understand that treating their customers like expendable cargo is the wrong way, is the wrong approach, and that also contributes to create mistrust and drives the customers to their competitors. Now, overbooking is legal, but it's not the passenger's fault if such things happens, and it goes on to impact the flight. We'll also have third parties being affected as well, because the whole plane was delayed, even though it was ready to take off. The whole 9 year happened as the doors were closed, pretty much. Nonetheless, I think that this sets a bad precedent for the aviation industry, which is already suffering from low profit, low margins because of high fuel costs, high security maintenance, and not so stable economy. But they seem to do everything to continue to slump into bad PR and bad margin, bad profits. So companies like United ought to contribute to foster a better PR, a better engagement, and especially have their CEO think twice before he drafts such letter and have the whole thing backfire at him and at the company as well. I'm pretty sure that everyone by now has noticed that if you walk inside a McDonald's, there are two things that you will notice immediately. The first one is that the number of cash registers, the cash limit, has diminished. And number two is that you will see these panels where you can interact. They're called a source of kiosk. They now have appeared pretty much all across the globe. The first time I saw it was 5 or 6 years ago when I was in Milan, downtown, in one of the restaurants, and there was a huge line of people still queuing up, preferring to deal with the cash register. And nonetheless, I just jumped through the line and tried for the first time the kiosk, which, in my opinion, it's actually very efficient. Now, I know that, in terms of automation, we have to think that what is the impact of removing the physical person from interacting with a customer, with a client. And McDonald's has now invested in the last 10 years into automation in order to remove people from the restaurant. So whenever there's a large and a global company like McDonald's, who has over 36,000 restaurants in 100 countries and a workforce of over 370,000 people, and you can do the math. So if you do think that when you have these kiosks that are replacing people, so if companies like big as McDonald's are saving money, that's the bottom line, because they don't have to pay for the training, they have to pay for the training with the employee, the salaries, whatever benefit that may come. They also don't have to pay the people who are going to train new workers. So there's a line that evolves in itself where the companies are doing the math, doing their projection, and notice that let's remove the regular employee, the regular human being, and let's have for a few years, probably for the next 5 years, there will be a continuing iteration into the tryouts of this kiosk. It might be a bit of utopic speaking this, but most likely, if this is successful, we're going to see that the people working at McDonald's will be thoroughly working only on the food on the back. There will be only one manager supervising the floor, and we'll slowly see that the cash lane, the person, the clerk over there, will be a figure of the past. One of the reasons that pushed McDonald's probably to go into this direction is how the previous 10 years for the company weren't that good. They were slumping the sales. McDonald's tried new products, new food, new offers, but it didn't seem to stick out with the customers. So with the kiosk being installed in many locations, especially those who see high traffic of customers, we have McDonald's now is making a big statement that is willing to embrace drastic changes in order to maintain its status. If you do think about the past, where McDonald's was just like pretty much a place where you go for your cheap hamburgers, and all you have people also serving you from the kiosk to the parking lot, and we have the drive-thru that always had a person working and dealing with you. Now we have the developing of better AIs, better machines, and of course we have more and more automated relationship between customers and companies. The other aspect where automation has been influential in the past years, and also with different responses, is the automotive industry. If you remember 30 to 40 years ago, there were already debates and arguments whether the introduction of robots inside the assembly line were the cause basically of massive unemployment. However, there's the need for a solution to assist people. This is why they introduced the robots, was to assist people on the floor. And actually, it came natural with the introduction of bigger, more sophisticated vehicles. So you have to have something that can help the labor of the human being into doing the heavy lifting here. And the requirements for their product also to have the robots aiding the humans on the floor. Now machines are expanding the presence into those areas where the human presence was fundamental. And we see that companies like Uber is heavily investing into self-driving technologies. Now, imagine the future, future scenario where there's the need for a person to pick up passengers. There Uber will achieve a win-win scenario, tenfold in profits eventually. Nonetheless, there are plenty of problems to fix before anything like that will ever happen. We know that last week Uber's self-driving car was involved in an accident, and now it's back on the road. Now, what I just said, a win-win situation. If in the next 10 to 20 years, something like Uber and having all self-driving cars, it's going to remove the driver from the expenses. So then again, we will see companies that are going to tenfold their profits. They don't have to invest more in physical people to do the job that now AI and machines are doing. There are also other factors that are influencing the AI from being perfect. So we know that so far testing of the cars, self-driving cars from Tesla, Google, and also, of course, again, Uber, were all done in ideal conditions around highways, on towns, all in places like California, where the weather is quite good. So it's not an harsh environment, but, picture this. Picture like for the challenges we can find on the road. I'm not speaking of the traffic, I'm not speaking of pedestrians, things that are so given for granted, like the long winters in northern states in the US or in Canada as well. So we have here constant snowfalls that create bad work conditions, and also the use of chains and wheels to move across the snowy road is not warranted everywhere. So we don't know how probably this self-driving car and the AI that pushes them is going to adapt. So here we have safety once again being tested to the limit in order to develop better AI. We can only see how in the next 5 years, the minimum, if any change into a more sophisticated brain for this driving cars, for these self-driving cars is being developed or not. All we can do now is to see the progress. Then so far it's been positive, and then again, it's something that implies a small step, continually being constant, and being very resilient on how this car will adapt on the road that eventually will change the way of life, like we're doing right now.